Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Crunching Your Growth, the show where we cut through the fluff and get into the real moves that drive revenue. So, if you're a founder and you're carrying the sales number on your back and you've got a sales team, but results feel inconsistent, today's episode is going to hit home. And there are a lot of founders out there, as we've seen in the past, that really do feel like they're the sales team and they have to be on top of it and they have to be the ones driving it. And that's not necessarily true. So, my guest tonight is Matt Uber. He's a founder of Spinwheel Sales. Matt spent 15 plus years in automotive and BDC operations, where speed to lead, follow-up discipline, and accountability aren't theories. They're the difference between winning and losing. He's also spent 10 plus years in sales leadership, and now he helps companies across industries build scalable sales infrastructure through consulting, coaching, staffing, and outbound strategy. And the key there is scalable, because there's a lot of people out there with infrastructure that buy systems, that put systems in place, but they're not necessarily scalable. So we're talking about how to move from founder-led sales to a system-led revenue engine without losing culture, without adding chaos, and without hiring your way out of a process problem. So let's bring Matt in. Let's hear his story. He's got a unique story, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of you. So Matt, welcome, and thanks for taking the time to come on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you take us back, because that's sort of an interesting background to go from car sales to what you're doing today.
So I've actually never sold a car before in my life. I've been in automotive, but I've sold to car dealers, not selling cars to customers. So about 15 years ago, I had been in more of a retail sales environment. One of my sales leaders at the company I was at when the company was acquired by Sprint Wireless went to go work for this company called Copart Automotive. They were an automotive auction, a Fortune 500 company, and he became a vice president of sales, and he had a unique idea of bringing somebody in that doesn't have the automotive background but has the sales chops that he felt comfortable with. So he brought me in and kind of tested a theory of why don't we bring somebody in that isn't from an automotive background but has kind of more of a hardcore sales background that I had at the time, and that was my introduction into automotive. From there, I worked in a variety of different entry-level territory sales, direct-to-dealer type of approaches, to where eventually in the end of 2017, I landed at this company called Dealer On, where I was quickly able to scale and to grow into a leadership role. I was able to find myself not just running the top individual territory, then I ran the top region, then I built an SDR team, I built an independent division, I built multiple new divisions while still being in the role that I was in, and I would take the sales organization from about 10 total sales reps to over 60, and that was kind of the springboard for me to create my system that I built there, that I then took to many other companies in the automotive industry, and over the past couple of years have taken that system outside of the automotive industry and allowed that to work with other companies. Specifically, I focus on founder-led organizations with startup companies that need help around systems around the revenue side.
So you had a pretty healthy life. I mean, you had a career, you were doing quite well. Why'd you decide to take the leap?
Look, the reality is I built sales organizations for multiple companies, and I said, hey, if I can keep doing this, I know my system works. Why build it for somebody else when I can first build it for myself? So the original idea I had when I left the corporate world is I wanted to build a sales academy, because my passion, Phil, is to develop future leaders. And I like to do that through hiring people with zero sales experience, teach, train, and develop them to be the future leaders in business. That's really what my passion is. And my vehicle for that was limited when in the corporate world. But probably like so many other people, I was restricted to make that decision. It took me about 2 years to actually pull the string on that idea that I had, because I had those golden handcuffs that every time I attempted to leave, they bring me more salary or give me a new role or more exciting responsibility. So I resisted that urge probably further than I should have, but eventually was able to make that jump and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs that have great careers, they have a great job, and they want to take that leap, but then they sort of balk at it because let's face it, it's risky. You know, you
Yep.
you were married. You had a life.
I had one daughter at that time, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's got to be a little scary.
Sure. And for me, it was not the fear of losing, it was the fear of walking away from the security that I
Yeah.
had. I mean, I had a very handsome salary. I had money in the bank. I could afford to have not made income for a good period of time and bet on myself. And ultimately, that's the reason I was able to do it. But the problem I had was the job I had. They were paying me handsomely, and I was good at it. It was easy. And why rip that Band-Aid off if you don't need to?
Yeah. Well, uh, yeah, it's a tough one. I was in a position at one point. I had a business. Started this business in DC, and it was retail stores. And then we built a website, and we were selling meals online. This was early days of the internet, and we got acquired by a supermarket chain, and I had to go and work for the supermarket chain and transitioning the website, because that was the thing that was most valuable to them. Transitioning the website to their shop from home, and you know, obviously we sold the business to them, so there was money there. But for me to work there for 2 years, they were paying me this salary and the benefits and all kinds of stuff, and it was extremely lucrative, and I was miserable. I thought to myself, this was a $2.5 billion company, and it was just, for me, it was miserable, and I couldn't wait for my 2 year deal to be up to get out of there, because I just hated the politics of it all. I hated the decision making process. I hated the fact that people showed up in the office on Saturdays with nothing to do. Just show up. It was, and they'd sit around and drink coffee, and then they'd criticize others for not coming in on Saturday. And you're like, well, what do you do? I mean, it was just the
Yeah.
most bizarre. And to me, I hated it. And, I left it and to found another company. And again, basically be not broke, but you didn't have an income. It was just like you said,
Yeah.
you have this cushion, and it was hard to give up. But at the same time, my sanity, I thought, was a little more important. Now, granted, I'm not a good employee. I'll tell you that, and I make
Yeah.
no bones about it. I am not a good employee. So, but so I understand exactly what you're talking about. But at the same time, the freedom. Every entrepreneur that I've ever interviewed on this show or talked to or anything, they all want freedom, and it's not about freedom to work when you want to or this and that, because everybody generally works harder. It's the freedom to make decisions on your own, a freedom for you to be the one who's responsible. If you make the decision and it's wrong, it's on you, but that's the freedom of it all.
Yeah, I was lucky in my corporate world that I was given that autonomy. I was given the autonomy of making decisions and not really having to ask for permission. I, though, like you, this is early in my career, I was aggressive. I was assertive. I was that manager who would push people because I would try to hold them to my standards, and I
Right.
was super intense with what I brought. And so I had to ultimately learn how to be a better leader, and I did it in the front lines. I would tell you one of the other things that I would say the two biggest things that made me make the decision to jump. Number one is I saw how expendable people were in the corporate world. I
Yeah.
saw that you have one bad quarter, and they'd make a decision against you. There was a certain amount of people that would make money in the business, and most other people, even if you were making money that was good money compared to what you're making, you're not making good money. And the second part of it is I went to go to a company that was recruiting me to come work for them. And the owner of the company had me fly out to his city and said he wanted me to have dinner with him. He invited me over to his family house with him and his brother, who were the co-owners of the business. And they have an amazing mansion in Monterey, California, multi-million-dollar house overlooking the mountains and a golf course and everything. And for most people, they'd be like, man, this is amazing, have an opportunity to do this. But the realization I had as I was walking in that door is, I will never be able to buy a house like this when I'm an employee of a company like this.
Right.
And money's not my main driver. I said kind of before, like my main driver is growth and development of people. But money ultimately, in my opinion, comes when you develop enough people and enough processes, enough, part of enough changing people's lives. But I had that realization that I'll only ever make this amount of money when I'm working for a company. And the only real opportunity for me to break free of that ceiling is to go build something on my own. And I had confidence that I could build stuff. I had never failed at building something in the past, whether it be in the corporate constraints. So I just bet on myself.
Yeah. Everybody bets on themselves as an entrepreneur. And,
Yeah.
and I understand what you're saying. It's not about, you're not doing it for the money, but you're doing it because you want to aspire to things.
Sure.
90% of the entrepreneurs that I know have money, but they don't. Very few build lavish mansions. Very few build all that until they get into the, when you get into the 300, 400, 500 million dollar net worth,
Yeah.
maybe you do that. But even still, most of them, it's not. Money becomes a tool, and
Correct.
a tool to reinvest and grow and do other things with. At least for the people that that I know. So
Yeah, and my experience with money and material projects is I think that when you're young in business, money is a big motivator for a lot
yeah,
of people
sure.
because you're not used to having it. But then once you see it, once you experience it, once you use it, you realize that the material objects become very short-lived. I mean, you could go buy that brand new car, that dream car, within 2 months, it's just a car.
Right.
You could go buy that huge mansion, and at the end of the day, it's no different than sleeping in the bed in the hotel. It's just a bed in a house. And so you might buy that thing of your dreams, but you realize that that excitement wears off, that it fades, and that if you can use your money to do other things, to have other freedoms, that's more valuable where the money is used.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, the car analogy is a perfect one because I'm guilty of it. I fall in love with cars, and then you get them, and it becomes a car, and then I fall out of love with it, and then I want
Yep.
another one, and I go, you know what? And I gave up on that years ago, and now it's because early on in my life I would get a new car every year, and then it became just a waste, and I think by the time I was in my 30s, I sort of outgrew it. Now it's like I keep them until they die and then move on to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you, so essentially you have several different components to your business because you're not
Yeah.
just doing outreach for people.
Yeah. So, I mean, the main thing I do and the main thing I want to do, and I've had this kind of adjustment in my business at fourth quarter of last year. I made a lot of major adjustments, restructuring back to kind of get to the grounded aspect of what I want. And the main thing I want to do is I want to do more coaching and consulting. I have a passion for coaching and developing young salespeople. I prefer to hire people and bring in people who have no sales experience at all, teach, train, and develop them from scratch and help them grow. I like at this point to help companies. Probably where one of the mistakes I made when I became a new entrepreneur is that I tried to solve this problem for every company in existence instead of really niching down and understanding where my true value is and the true type of companies that I'm positioned to help the most. And right now where I've landed in the place that I am most passionate about helping are those technical founder-led organizations that don't have a sales revenue background, but find themselves to be the most technical, the most knowledgeable, and the most equipped to sell their product, but they really don't know how to sell. And when they even get to the point where they have now evolved past them needing to be the seller, because I think that every founder needs to be the seller of your product for a period of time, but when you need to then bring in that sales organization, in the first couple of years when I would work with founders like that, I would provide them the sales team. I would give them a team of SDRs. I would give them a team of account executives. I would serve as a fractional CRO for them. But what I like to do now at this point is I like to teach them how to hire. I like to teach them what to look for, what a candidate should be, the type of interview questions they should ask, the type of profile a salesperson should have. And I like to work side by side with them on teaching them how to manage, scale, and build their own sales team so that ultimately, if I've done my job effectively, I manage myself out of working with this client over time. I think too many times consultants or coaches want to maintain needing to be used and they never are able to manage themselves out. If I'm doing it correctly, I'm managing myself out of that role in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, that's a good point. That there a lot of coaches want to keep it going for a long time. I I started coaching about 2 years ago. I started mentoring at the University of Maryland and University of Baltimore and some other schools on entrepreneurs but that was that was free for years ago, 10 years ago, and I liked it and I found it fulfilling. But that's sort of you're mentoring somebody who's you're just trying to get them started, and then you're getting them, letting them fly away. But then I started coaching about 2 years ago, primarily because I have Crunch Growth, and as an agency, we deal with brands primarily, and in that 10 to $50 million range, and you find a lot of founders hit plateaus along the way, and they don't understand how to get from this point and get over it, or the founder becomes the bottleneck at some point. They get to 10,
For sure.
15 million, they become the bottleneck. And so we saw it with clients. And so I would offer the service and say, hey, look, I can help you with this. And it was just really started out as a temporary benefit. I'd get paid for it, but I'd say, look, I can help you out. It'll take about 2 months, 3 months. And they were sort of short-term things. But they wound up turning into longer term deals only because the client would say, hey, maybe every
Of course.
month we can meet, maybe every two
Yep.
months we can meet.
Yep. Yep.
And that I like. And I like the fact that, like you said, I'm not trying to give them the answer. I'm trying to get them to see the answer themselves. Because if I give them the answer, then it's my answer, right? And that's not maybe the right answer, right? I'm just trying to get them to understand and think through the problem so that they can
Correct.
see it themselves and overcome it. And so, like you, I really enjoy it, and I've started to do a bit more of it.
Yeah, it's enjoyable for me. I love to see where a company's been and then understand where they want to go and help fulfill that expectation with them. I would tell you the thing outside of coaching and consulting I like to do more than anything is building. And putting processes in place and executing those processes. I would tell you probably where I could do a better job of as an entrepreneur is once it's built, then the operating side. But I know where probably my inefficiencies is as a leader, and that's why I need to make sure that I've got people next to me that can kind of help execute the operated strategy. And I think that's the important thing I really try to talk to the founders I work with about is if you are not a revenue focused person, bring in a person who covers your gaps. Let me be that person for you until we can help you find that person or develop that person, because I can't do everything perfectly. I have to have people who support and supplement me inside of my own business, because I know my strength is revenue. My strength is building. I'm an idea guy, but I'm going to need somebody to go in and execute that after it's put in place and the steps are there. That's just not me.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I learned that a long, long time ago, and frankly, it was one of the reasons my first business failed was because I had this idea that I was 27, and I had this idea that I was the entrepreneur. I had to do everything. I had to know everything. I had to, and it wasn't good. The business itself, the core of the business, the sales were very good, but the operation of it was just so bad. And
Yep.
I was a terrible, terrible leader. I was terrible at process management, terrible at development. And that's, I'm not one to give up, but after 3 years, I had to walk away because I sold the business because I knew that there was something wrong. And I had this warped view of what I was supposed to do, and it wasn't until the next business that I got involved in that I saw where my flaws were. And like you, I have to surround myself with people who can get things done. I can see the direction. I understand where something has to go. I can tell you that this brand needs to go from here to here, and these are the steps that it's going to take to get there. But I can't do it. I need somebody else. So that's how I hire people. I hire people in my organization that can essentially, like you said, back me up and execute, because it's not me. And
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way. And the other thing I learned, people used to say all the time, uh, you always want to hire people that are smarter than you, and that's just so wrong, because when you have a startup, then you have a team of smart people that are bumping into each other because they all have their own ideas. What you want to hire for are people that have, the same vision of where you want to get to and can help you get there, and complementary skill sets, not dominant skill sets.
I heard it this way, and this resonated with me, and it resonated with my business and kind of the evolution of where my business went. And so for other founders that are maybe in this position, I felt like what me and my business partner, when we originally created it, we had a bunch of generalists. We had a bunch of loyal generalists who could kind of jump in and help with everything. They were incredibly dynamic. They were useful. They were loyal. They were hardworking. But we didn't have specialists. And as we evolved into the business we had, ultimately we needed to bring in specialists. We had people who knew how to do marketing, but we didn't have any marketing specialists. So we had to bring in a marketing expert. I understood marketing generally, but not at the level a lot of people do. So I brought in a person at my level for marketing, and I believe in creating partnerships inside of my business. So when I bring in leaders like that, I give them stake and equity in the business, stake and equity in the part of the business that they're running for me. And then there was other parts that we're bringing in, and we're bringing in experts to cover those areas. And that moved from the generalists, which could only get us to here, to then bringing in the specialists, which allowed us to really kind of take the roof off of our potential when we brought those next level people in.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think in the evolution of a business, when you first start out, it's not uncommon for founders to bring in a bunch of generalists, because you have to be able to do a bunch of things really fast, and you've got to
Yep.
have people going here and there, and you really can't afford to have specialists. But then you get to a certain point, and you have to start rearranging the team, and sometimes it's a difficult thing for people, because you've got these guys that worked really hard for you. They're loyal, they're smart, but then all of a sudden they're not going to be able to get you to the next level.
Correct.
And you have to have some hard conversations. And the analogy I always use is Larry Ellison with his company, with Oracle, he in the early 90s nearly went bankrupt, because he had these people that got him from, I think they were doing, 250 or 300 million at the time, but they went from zero to like 250, 300 million. And they couldn't get higher than where they needed to be. And he had to make some really tough decisions about these people that were with him for years, that he really liked and that were friends. And he had to basically rebuild his entire management team. It wasn't
Yeah.
because they were bad people or they were incompetent. They couldn't get over that hump. And again, that's something we deal with and coach through all the time, because that is the steps, right? You go from zero to X. With 0 to 10 million, the founder has to change his focus. The team has to change. People have to be realigned. You have to build some new teams. You have to bring in new people. Then you get to 20 million or 30 million. You have to do the same thing over and over again. And it's tough on founders to be able to see that, because they don't always see it.
I mean, I could do it. And I mean, what I value myself in the system that I build for my organization and for all the organizations I work with is a growth from within, build from the bottom up type of organization. And if you say, hey, Matt, replace yourself, duplicate yourself, or duplicate the levels that are needed to be in my business all day long, that's fine, because that's my specialty. I know how to duplicate myself over and over and over again. And for me, on the technology startup side, which is generally where I work, I believe every first sales level should be an SDR or a BDR. People call them different things, but somebody who is in regards to business development, cold calling, appointment setting, getting meetings with prospective clients. I think the next level you graduate to, and this can happen as early as 90 days, is then you evolve into a discovery specialist. And then within 6 months, you should be able to evolve into a full cycle AE. But I require that somebody must at least have over proficient level access of an SDR, be an exceptional discovery person, because I believe that's the most foundational side of being an excellent seller, and then presenting and closing skills that allows you to be full cycle AE. I think once you do those things, then through that, part of your responsibility of growth from an SDR to the next level is you need to make at least 2 people equal to you. You need to be able to duplicate your efforts. And if you can't do those things, it's fine. You're just not going to grow inside of my organization without being able to make people around you better. Because there is a common mistake in sales, and I'm sure you've seen this, where there are individual sellers that are fantastic. And I think most sales companies make the mistake. Most companies make the mistake of promoting the best seller to their leader, but the best seller most commonly isn't the best leader. I'm a sports guy. I come from a sports background. I'm a big fan of sports. If you look right at the NBA, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, all those guys tried to be executives, leaders, coaches, and they all failed at that because they can never take their excellence, their individual greatness, and understand how to make the people around them through a system. But you look at people like Popovich, Steve Kerr, Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson had a triangle offense that got the most out of his Michael Jordans, Kobe Bryant's, but he also got the most out of his Steve Kerr's, Derek Fisher's. He could get the most out of his role players by building a system that duplicated the benefits of everybody on the team and found the stars, help the stars elevate their game and make them better, but also get the most out of your role players. And that's what I, as a leader, aim to do, is get the most out of everybody on my team. Not only the star players are going to reap the rewards there. And I think that's where a lot of companies make the mistake, is just because they can sell, we assume they can lead others to sell. And in most cases, they don't know how to take what makes them special and put it into other people.
Yeah, 100%. I think we saw it this weekend with with some of the NFL teams, and you look at you look at some of the teams and who they're being coached by, and the job that they've done. Look at the Detroit Lions and how that coach turned that team around. Look at the Patriots and the job they did this year. Yeah,
I mean, that guy turned it around so quick.
Yeah, but he's a great. He learned he was a good football player, but not a great football player.
Sure.
And then he realized, okay, maybe I'm better at motivating my team. And then he went and coached in a few other places, assistant coach, etc. Then he took over the Titans and he did a phenomenal job. Then they fired him for, one bad season, but
right.
New England picked him up and look at the job he's doing. He's phenomenal. But they're the exceptions. Most of the great coaches, they understood the game. Like even Phil Jackson, right? He played the game at a level, not an extremely high level, but at a level. So he understood it, and then he surrounded himself or got involved with some great coaches, took from them, put it all together in his way. And you're right, triangle. So.
And a system. Yeah. And look, I was always the top seller at every company and every organization I've been in. But when I moved into a leadership role and I had to start making other people around me, I couldn't just say, hey, go be me. Because a lot of what I am is natural. I wake up with this amount of energy and enthusiasm. This is not an act. This is me every day, all day, 7 days a week, 365. Most people, if I say, hey, go just be me, they're not going to be able to do it. If I say, hey, be very quick-witted in regards to how you can ask questions and think of those things, which I believe is the number one attribute a good salesperson should have, is the questions that you ask. Most people can't think on their feet that way. They need to be programmed, taught, scripted, trained, and to what to say in a controlled environment. But if I just said, everybody just go do what I do, most people would fail. But I had to be able to create a system, teach concepts, not words, teach people, understand what motivates them. And I think that's another big thing when I'm working with entry-level sellers, that probably one of the first things I have to do within the first couple of weeks, which is sit down and really understand, do you have a why? What is your why? And it needs to be something other than money, because if it's just money, then once again, we kind of already talked about that earlier.
Yeah, no question about it. Let me ask you a question. Do you think anybody can be trained to be a salesperson?
No.
It's got to have the right they've got to have
You
the
gotta have
right.
personal skills. You got to be likable. I think that's one of the things that's like you either have that or don't. Some people just aren't likable, and they could try it all they want. Some people aren't have the ability to be clear communicators, and I think that you have to at least be able to communicate concisely and clearly. But I think 75% of people can be salespeople.
I
Yeah.
think Matt. I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to be likable, and when I told you before, I got involved when I sold a business. I got involved with. We got acquired by a major supermarket chain, and I was doing this piece of transitioning the website to the shop at home, but I also had to run a division and had a bunch of buyers, and they would buy. And the one thing I realized, which never occurred to me before, was that all the people that were successful selling their products in were all people that everybody liked.
Mhm.
And people want to do business with people they like and trust.
Yep.
And the best salespeople were not necessarily the best um, at doing. There's a tremendous amount of when you're getting products in our world, right? You have a consumer product and you're trying to get it into retail. There's so much paperwork involved, and I'm sure there's paperwork involved in some of the businesses you do, but it's just so ridiculous, so much paperwork, and they're not always the best at it, but they're the best at getting it done for the buyer, right?
Yeah.
And they were the most successful. But it's always people that were likable. You loved having them around. You loved talking to them, and so I think you're right. One of the biggest things is they have to be likable. So.
Yeah, I think that some of the attributes I've seen of the best salespeople is I would say one of the best abilities is availability. I think being available when somebody needs something, but not being so available that you're always there. There is a value of not being desperate, but being in demand. I think that your word is everything that you have. And so I like to set very clear expectations, be very clear in regards to what they should expect, and then just make sure that I execute and deliver on that. So I think one of the biggest processes that I teach my team, which is how to implement and utilize CRMs to be able to manage a large book of business to where when you tell a customer, and I do this intentionally for a lot of my customers, is I'm going to call you back Thursday at 3:22 to remind you of this conversation. And I make sure I call them back at 3:22 and remind them I told them I was going to do that because I set the expectation that when Matt says he's going to do something at a certain time, he gets it done for you. And I don't ever drop the ball. And I think so many salespeople make that just simple mistake of not being able to follow up effectively, set proper expectations, and deliver. And that's a big part where they lose some of that trust that you mentioned outside of the likability.
Oh yeah, no question about it. I mean, you have to follow through. If you can't be counted on, and we have to, if you have to hound somebody to get something done, it never ends well.
No, I
And
mean, one of the other things I think that's missed so often, not talked enough about in sales, which is the value of controlling a conversation and being in control of a conversation in sales. As soon as I lose control of a conversation with my prospective client, then I've likely lost the opportunity to sell that customer. But when I can hold frame and I can hold the control of where the conversation's going and not, that's where I maintain the likelihood of being able to get a customer to say yes. And so there's a very clear process I outline in my training process to make sure that you maintain control, dictate steps. If you can't get the close on the first call, then have a clear next step that's following up on that process to make sure that you maintain that control of the next step.
yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Keeping control of the conversation, because I've seen a lot of salespeople buckle when they start getting pushback on certain things, and you
Yeah.
can almost feel it that
Mhm.
they're buckling.
Yeah. The way I teach how to overcome any objection is I use a very simple concept, which is called listen, acknowledge, make a statement, ask a question. And once again, I don't teach scripts, I teach concepts. And that's just, you listen to what the customer says, you repeat it back to them, making sure that you heard exactly what they said. You make a statement to either address what they talked about or to rephrase the direction of the conversation. And then you take back control by asking a question and determining where that conversation goes next. And if you can maintain that process, in most cases, you can have the customer feel like they're heard without them, taking control of the conversation from you.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, to be honest. And now that you say that, I'm not a sales guy, but I've been around it enough, and obviously I have people selling to me, but that's an interesting concept, keeping control of the conversation. Because again, Matt, I've seen it a million times where you
Yeah.
give them a little pushback, and some of these guys just crumble, and
Yeah.
then they don't get the deal. So
Yeah, and I find that weaker salespeople actually, I don't know if you've seen this or experienced this, Phil, but I find weaker salespeople actually avoid objections. They avoid negatives in the conversation. To me, I think a strong salesperson welcomes it, because if you get an objection, the customer's actually telling you what you need to do to actually make the sale of that process, right? So for me, I don't avoid the objections. I encourage them, because I know that I've got a technical way to overcome those objections and then use them to my advantage in that sense. So that's one of the big signs I do if I listen to a client's calls, is like, why did you steer the conversation there? Well, I didn't want to bring up price. Oh, you're scared of price. Okay, got it. So let's work on not being scared of price, right? Let's have price be the forefront of your conversations moving forward so that we can get over that hurdle. Because do you not think that your product is worth what you're charging? Maybe we need to talk about how much you're charging for your product if you don't think it's worth it. Those type of conversations.
yeah, that's a that's a great one, because I think too many times people avoid the price discussion. That, oh, I'll get back to you. Let me put it in an email and send it to you, and that's not really the right way to do it.
No.
You want to
Put a
confront.
smile on my face when they ask me that, because I know that I've built enough value. I could tell the average customer in a sales presentation, I could tell you before I ever even talk about my product, the likelihood of me being able to sell that customer, because I believe all of the closing happens in the sales discovery. And if my job is done effectively, I'm asking the questions to get the customer to uncover their own and admit to their own needs that I know that I'll be able to solve within my product solution. And that if I get them to explain and admit of their issue, and I know what I can solve or not, then I know if I've built the value differentiator to be able to overcome whatever the price conversation is. And if I haven't, then I'm not ready to yet go into the product presentation yet, because I don't have enough value to justify it.
Yeah, no, that you're 100% correct. I mean, we obviously have people that sell for us to get more clients, but we usually do a tremendous amount of homework ahead of time to sort of understand what the brand is going through and where they need the most help, and then we gear the discussion around that. Not We don't want to tell them what we
Yeah.
know, but we want to sort of draw it out of them.
You
To
need
see
them
if-
to say it, because if they
yeah,
don't say it, then they don't realize it. And you might know it. It might be clear and obvious, but if they don't say it, then they didn't admit it. And until they admit it, you really can't use it against them. And when they admit it, then you have the opportunity to use that against them in the art of the sale.
yeah, and the other thing is, sometimes what you find is they don't know they have that problem,
Correct. Yep.
and then you're trying to discuss it with them in a way that, and again, I'm not a sales guy, but the only thing I know how to do is sort of show people where their problem is, get them to understand it or get them to see it. Because if you can get them to see that they have that problem, then you can say, here's how we can solve that problem. Now you've sort of done, in my opinion, you've done two things. One is you've shown them that you understand their business, and you just pointed out a problem that they may not have known about, or you got them to see the problem, and now you've offered that solution. So
Yeah, and the approach I generally will use, and obviously every customer, every scenario is is different. But what I like to do is it never is coming from me. It's never coming from my opinion. But
Right.
if I have something that's clear and obvious that I need them to admit, that I don't want it to be me telling them this is what's wrong with your business, I say, hey, most of the customers I talk to that are very similar to you under this scenario, I commonly see this issue. So I'm giving them permission through Jones effect to say, yes, this is also a problem for me. Yeah. And I also give them the understanding that if that is a problem, I'm well understood and equipped to be able to help you potentially solve that problem. So it's really how you ask the question. I'll give you a perfect example. How you ask the question changes the direction of the whole conversation. So for a couple of years, I used to sell websites, and a part of the websites I sold, they had a feature in there where you were able to put a certain message based off the geofence location of where the customer went to that website from. So let's say I was on a military base. The system knew I was sitting on a military base, and it could deliver me a military-focused message because I'm on a military base. And then if I was on a college, it could give me an offer based off of me being on a college. And so when I would go through the presentation, for the first 6 months of me presenting this, I'd say, hey, let me ask you, do you know what geofencing is? And they'd be like, yeah. I'd say, perfect. And then I'd start selling, right? Alternatively, I switch it to say, hey, most customers I talk to have heard of the word geofencing, but they don't actually know what it means. Quick question. Do you understand what geofencing is? Now, 90% of the customers were willing to admit they didn't know what it was because their ego wasn't involved, where I just gave them permission to admit they didn't know what it was, to where the first one, I asked it in a way that they should know what it is. And so they just say, yeah, even though they didn't know what it was. And I end up selling something that the customer didn't have a technical founding understanding of what I'm selling, and now I'm speaking in the wind, in a sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a lot of things are in how you phrase. It's even how you manage people and how you phrase things. You know,
Correct.
we always. I just had this conversation with one of the clients I coach about how to talk to their folks, because I said, have you ever heard the ice cream sandwich? You do a positive, then you do a negative, then you do a positive.
Oh, yeah.
And they had never heard about it, and so I sort of explained it to them in a way, and it was almost like a revelation for them and how to manage. But sales, to me, uh, sales, you have internally selling and externally selling to get customers, but you're also internally selling on a constant basis, especially with a startup, to try and get
Yep.
people to understand and believe and get things done. And some of the best CEOs that I've ever seen, or and best founders and that I've ever interviewed or talked to or been involved with, they're great at selling, but selling the message, not
The
necessarily
dream.
selling the
Yep.
product.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a sales leader, one of the most important things is motivating your team. I mean, especially in an appointment setting, cold calling, high rejection job, you have to have your people showing up, being sold on the vision every day. They need to be sold on their career path. They need to be sold on the opportunity, the company, what they'll be able to accomplish. And so when I say, like, if your goal is just to make a ton of money, you're likely it's not going to be enough for you to go through what you need to go through. But if your goal is to get promoted, gain experience, add relevancy, manage, develop people, then that's typically enough for me to hook into to be able to really, really coach them, train them, sell them every day on what they committed to me as their dream and their goal and their why. And so, yeah, I think team building, management, and motivation in sales, that's imperative. You don't have an understanding of what your team is here to do and what really motivates them, then I think you'll find a large amount of drop-off and a large amount of people not fulfilling their potential, and especially in these high-volume rejection sales roles.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you just said rejection. And, that's always one of the things that's most difficult for people to handle, rejection. And
Yeah.
I, I, I relate this, I relate that back to when we had a business, and we had built these stores, and we needed to raise capital, and we started going out and raising capital. And I don't know if you've ever had to raise capital in your life, but
No,
it's one of the most difficult things, and it's a numbers game, and
yeah.
it's constant rejection. And I remember I had a co-founder, and we would walk out of these meetings, and I'd be happy. Like, I'd say, oh man, we didn't get the deal, but I'd be like, oh man, that was great. And I'd be taking notes. It's like, I don't understand how you could be so happy. I said, the guy told us exactly what would make the deal go through. He told us. I said, so all
Yeah.
we have to do is go back sort of refocus, come back to him. That's all we have to do.
Yeah.
I said, he gave us the keys,
Yep.
and my co-founder at the time was like, God, this is just terrible. We had 10 meetings and we got 10 rejections, and like, dude, we're gonna have 100 meetings and we're only gonna get one deal.
Yeah. Law of averages is everything. I mean, in sales, that's a foundational aspect of what I teach. For me, cold calling. In the automotive sector, 60 calls equals 10 connections.
Right.
So you make 60 dials and you maybe get to a decision maker less than 10 times. And out of those 10, if you're good, you get 2 people that give you a yes. And out of those 2 people that give you a yes, 75% of those people are going to show up to the meeting, 25% aren't. And then from a cold call, if you're a really good seller, you sell about 20 to 30% of those deals who show up turn into revenue. And so if you look at the amount of volume you need to do to just get a single deal, then you got to work those numbers. I would subscribe. If anybody put me in real power in government, I would subscribe that every person under the age of 25 must do 6 months either in a restaurant serving business and in a door-to-door style sales job. And I would bonus them heavily if they did both of those periods for a 6-month span under the age of 25. I think that the foundational skills you will learn working with people in a server role, dealing with the volume of rejection and what it takes to go out there and get your ass kicked every single day in a door-to-door sales role will equip you for anything you have in life. Luckily, I married my wife before I got really into sales, but man, I almost wish I had a 1-week pass to be a single man just to go test my sales rejection skills out in the dating market in person. I anticipate the dating market's quite a bit different in the past 16 years since I've been with my wife. But yeah, I mean, that's something, that law of average game is vital to learn, to understand. And a no just means I'm one step closer to a yes. And I have to get 100 no's ultimately to get a yes. And if I'm not getting 100 no's, then I can never get to that yes. And then the other part that's so missed in that volume of rejection is, I believe sales comes down to successes in sales is 3 things. It's always 3 things. It's only 3 things. It's your pitch, your pace, and your attitude. And so your pace is the volume of activity, the work that you do. Your pitch are the words you say, and the attitude is 90% of what will garner success or a lack thereof. And if at any point in time in that pace, you lose your attitude because of the rejection, your law of averages reset. So that 50, 10, 1 number I gave you before, as soon as you lose your attitude and you lose your confidence and you get frustrated by the no's, just reset that number because you're back at 0. And so you have to maintain that confidence, that energy, that enthusiasm, that excitement through those 50 no's so that you have the glasses on to see that one yes when it's in front of you.
Yeah. It's funny you should say, you should work in food service or, wait tables, because that is I grew up in the restaurant business, a very difficult thing to maintain your attitude. But, too many people take it personally. You got a rough customer, who's not satisfied and they're giving you grief. You're internalizing it and taking it personally. And you can't do that, because then you walk around and you go, oh, I had a terrible night. You have to turn it around.
Yeah, I wish I could teach this, and I've not found much success in teaching it. It's something that's innate to me. I'm a faith-filled person, so my faith drives a lot of how my mindset and my attitude works. I don't believe that I am the ultimate controller of my own outcome. I believe that I walk the life as righteous as I can, and that the things that are supposed to happen will fall into place. But I've always believed in everything happens for a reason. And I always believed in, if I can't control the outcome, don't think about it. And that has served me so well. And if I can't control the attitude of somebody else, why am I going to let it affect my attitude?
Yeah.
If I can't control the outcome, why am I going to think about it? If I can't change what happens next, then why am I going to focus on it? Has always been my mindset. And that's allowed me to always maintain focus on the end goal and not to get distracted by the negatives, the things that are outside of my control that I can't control anyway.
Yeah, that's great. We're pretty much out of time. Any closing words for entrepreneurs, founders, anybody out there?
No, I mean, for an entrepreneur or a founder, I would say bet on yourself. If you feel that you're not the most equipped in your business to be able to take your business where you need to be, Don't let your ego stand in the way of your own success. If you're not willing to bring on somebody to supplement you in your business, one of the biggest things I struggled with that I would have you not struggle with, which is find a coach, find a mentor, find somebody who's walked in those shoes that you want to become and consult with that person. Doesn't mean you got to hire them, but ask for help, ask for advice. And strength is in numbers in this business. Your network is the most important thing you have as an entrepreneur. So really focus on growing, putting as many successful people around you that are willing to help you, and you be willing to do that first for other people first.
Yeah, that's great. It's great advice. I'll tell you, Matt, this was pure gold, because you didn't just give people sales tips. You gave a blueprint to develop people, install structure, create the discipline that makes revenue predictable, and teams predictable. So for everyone watching, if you're still doing sales like a hustle hobby, you're going to keep getting hustle hobby results. So as Matt says, build the system. So if you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, share it with a founder who's trying to get out of the sales seat, drop a comment with your biggest sales bottleneck right now, your pipeline, your follow-up, conversion, team execution, whatever. And if you want to connect with Matt, learn more about Spinwheel Sales, we'll put his links in the description. Everything will be in the description, his social media, links to the website, and his LinkedIn. So if you want to get in touch, just feel free to reach right out to him. Anybody who's doing sales, I think you'll benefit from it. So Matt, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you having me, man.
My pleasure.